My calendar is on my computer at home, which is probably where I like it.
What is your Monday?
Tuesday would be the.
Let's go look at the back of people's heads. Like I do.
Why don't you call me or I can call you?
It was some concerns from the speaker about how long we should.
If they need to be ordered, then
And
we'll be able to
order things on site.
use Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
And that's.
And also.
So school. And. Based on.
Yeah, there's another. No, not for the child. With the. I've got, yeah.
Marie Bill
I'm wondering.
told me today.
So I decided that. Now, they smell. She's in this first time I've seen her face. For the children of our children, keep the circle home. Circle of freedom, circle of peace. For all of us in prison, circle for
This is a Wednesday.
Yeah, you didn't have to, we ever do that.
Hello, how are you? Good, thank you.
This Wednesday evening, there's more of a discussion of the principle of your questions and comments. You want me to? That's okay, yes. So that's the sign in if you want.
Okay, thank you.
Because they're having all their forums about exactly 4 o'clock on Sundays.
Right.
So, maybe the garden.
Yeah.
So that's Wednesday. This Wednesday at 7.
Barbara, are we getting that 4 o'clock as we were?
Yes. I figured it was a perfect time to do, so that we conflict with anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
I see, you're getting the Eastern,
Yeah.
Eastern time zone.
You want to wait 5 more minutes and see if people arrive? What's that?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wait on the camera. Pick up the mic and wait on the camera.
Hello.
Yeah, I'll make sure that works.
Hello.
Turn it on.
So we're gonna try
Yeah.
Hello up there in Zoom land.
Turn and look at that camera.
Okay. Hello out there in Zoom land.
Step back from the camera. There you go.
We'll start in a few minutes.
What's that?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that's the one.
It's because it's
You made it back. You made it back. Good. Yeah. Okay, so now I know that big blue ball works from the floor. We don't need to table that real quick. As long as we point it out. Yeah, let's go.
Well,
Turn it on. There you go.
well, welcome to the Comox Valley Unitarian Fellowship. We welcome you, whoever you are, whatever your age, race, faith, philosophy, whatever your background, identity, or orientation, you are welcome here. And for thousands of years, indigenous people have occupied the shoreline of eastern Vancouver Island in a place referred to as Comox, the land of plenty. We'd like to acknowledge that we meet here today on the unceded traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. Here are some of the Comox people. We are going to shake things up a little bit today, and we are going to do first our joys and concerns. And so we will ask if you have a joy or concern about a person, just say the person's name. We can bring the mic over to you, and then we will put a rock in the bowl. And it's not too full today, so we should be okay. And so if you have any joys or concerns, just raise your hand and we'll get you the microphone. And
on Wednesday, it's mine and Tamiko's birthdays.
happy birthday, Carolyn and Tamiko. 20th birthday, yes. Anybody else?
Wanted to send love and friendship to Norm and Nancy and their family for the transition that they're going through. Thank you.
So this is support, love for Norm and Nancy and their family as they go through the transition.
I would say it's joy, and I just moved from Victoria, but I found this wonderful woman by the name of Dev, who also goes by Jean, and she takes in donkeys, and every Sunday I go and I shovel manure, and they are amazing donkeys, and she's lovely, just really dedicated her life to ensure they have a good life, and we're not eating them.
And what's your name?
Trisha.
Hope people out there heard that. Trisha is new to this part of the island. She looked us up and found a woman named Deb and her donkeys. Is that correct? And she takes them in as strays and Trisha has been going and helping by shoveling manure and taking care of the donkeys. So that's a joy. Is there any on?
You should be able to hear them on your computer.
You can?
I think so. Try it out.
Christy? If you unmute yourself, maybe we can hear you.
Joy has one.
Ah, Joy. Where is she? Joy, you there?
Yes,
Hi. Go ahead, Joy.
I met a week ago yesterday with 3 of the friends that I taught with when I first came to British Columbia 43 years ago.
Oh my
And
God.
not one of us has changed a bit.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So that's Joy, who's saying she had a reunion with 3 of her colleagues from 43 years ago, teaching colleagues. Joy. I put one in for the donkeys.
Please. For technology, joy and concern.
Joy and concern for the technology.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, from Heather, the technology wizard, joys and concerns for the technology. Anybody else? No? Go ahead. One more? We're going to put one more stone in for those joys and concerns that are remain unspoken, know that we in our hearts.
I had to set up and reset up twice. The monitor that I brought would not recognize the computer. So yes, a joy and a concern for technology.
Are you content with what you got now?
It's not too bad. I'd like our Zoom participants to be a little bigger and tell up on a different screen.
Oh, that's what the
We're
bigger.
gonna do one upstairs.
We're gonna do one upstairs.
Great.
So at the
Turn it
beginning,
on.
no. So at the beginning of all of our services, we light a chalice as a symbol of the community and the flame of love. And we're doing that this morning, acknowledging that we're going to be talking about the proposed eighth principle. And we'll talk more about that. We, the member congregations of the Canadian Unitarian Council, covenant to affirm and promote individual and communal action that accountably dismantles racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions.
I have a question. What would happen if say in your classrooms, a new person came in and they had very, very dark skin? What would happen?
Just say hi.
Excellent, I would say hi too.
I don't know. Probably nothing.
Nice.
What do you think?
I love it. I love it that you guys would probably not have too much happen and say hello. I love that. Sometimes adults don't do that. Sometimes they need a reminder that people need to just be said hello to.
So we are going to, usually we sing them out, but we're being asked not to sing together. So we have a song called Woya Ya, and you've heard this a little bit before, and we'll ask you to stay and listen to it. And then at the end of it, you can go to your activities, and then we'll look forward to seeing you again when you come back.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will get there. So let's say you have to read an incredibly long email from your boss that you have to finish before the big meeting starts.
I don't
in
want to
10
read the
minutes.
email from my boss.
Or you're cramming for an exam the night before, but can't.
Sorry, the technology is an interesting challenge. But anyway, so we're talking about the eighth principle. This world includes racism, violence, other forms of oppression against people who are of different cultures or skin colors than those who hold the political and economic power. Many people are discriminated against and are not able to be welcomed, nor have their contributions embraced when they bring their authentic selves to the world or its institutions. People thus marginalized disproportionately bear the brunt of economic, social, and medical consequences of the world, wrestling with climate change and the COVID pandemic. The world is poorer for the exclusion of the energies, ideas, stories, and full participation of these people, and we're all poorer for the exclusion of these people. Here in Canada, we see increasing dismissal and violent treatment of Blacks, First Nations, and other people of color at the hands of police and other institutions. Black Lives Matter. First Nations deserve truth, healing, and reconciliation. Yet, our UU community of faith has developed steeped in this racist and oppressive culture. And within our UU communities in Canada and the United States, people of minority or marginalized groups are underrepresented compared to the percentage in the population. When they were asked by the Canadian Unitarian Council's Dismantling Racism Study Group in 2020, people spoke out, and many people from this congregation as well. The stories of people of color ranged from experiencing recurrent microaggressions to being told they did not belong. Some of these people left Unitarian Universalism. Some persisted because they felt strongly that it was their spiritual community. So now Canadian Unitarians have asked the CUC for change by proposing this eighth principle. And the CUC is asking us to commit to this change and work towards racial inclusion of all folks, regardless of race, culture, economic status, ability, or faith of origin. They will support us, but the work is ours. The CUC is asking us to do the ongoing individual and community work to change attitudes and extend our embrace of the embrace of our faith community, a community that has much to offer the world and has much to learn and gain from including the people with diverse backgrounds and understandings of the world. Will we commit to doing the individual and community work to become aware and change the bias of colonialist culture and how it limits us and keeps us at a distance from others? It is in this way that we can move forward into the world guided by 8 principles of Unitarian Universalism. Impossible to change, you say? And yet we can and do embrace change. Told we could not meet in person, we found a way to do so virtually. Told that we can be back together, but masking and not singing, we found a way to sign and sway and clap and snap to the music. We can and do embrace change. Now let's hear what Reverend Michael Tino of the Church of the Larger Fellowship has to say about how to create the accountability of the 8th principle. That's not Michael. You will hear that Michael gets very excited and joyful that the CUC passed the 8th principle. He's speaking last May, and indeed it was passed but considered not valid in its passing because of bureaucratic things, because of the exuberance that someone proposed it at the last minute. So we've taken extra time and the representatives. Heather and I were representatives last year, hope to go back for you this year. And we'll vote on the 8th principle again on November the 27th of at a special meeting of the CUC. Now, this is Reverend Michael Tino. Church of the Larger Fellowship is an online fellowship. It's the largest congregation of UUs. And he'll just, I find his speaking to be moving. Anyway, if you have any questions, you can ask.
This week, Unitarian Universalists will celebrate the 60th anniversary of the consolidation of the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America into the Unitarian Universalist Association. The new faith, Unitarian Universalism, that was created in 1961 was not based on creed, shared set of belief that everybody needed to ascribe to, but rather on covenant, a shared understanding of how we are together and how we show up in the world. And that covenant is best and most commonly expressed through the principles of our association, those principles that our congregations covenant to affirm and promote, those principles which are changing and changeable and a living part of our faith. Back in November, I was asked to submit a column to Quest, our monthly magazine, in which I explained why it was that we say Black Lives Matter and not all lives matter, when our first principle, in fact, affirms and promotes everyone's inherent worth and dignity. I wrote in part that all lives were not under equal threat of violence in our society. When we say Black Lives Matter to draw attention to the emergency that exists, an emergency that involves the force of the state in the person of police officers devaluing the lives of Black people to the point that they are regularly murdered. I tried to say that the entire system of policing is broken in our nation, and I tried to say that without eliciting the misguided and ignorant response that not all police officers are bad. And a note, anytime a systemic critique is met with not all, a red flag should go up in your mind. Not all men, not all white people, not all police officers, and yet systemic oppression still exists. I tried in my article to point to the large-scale and radical changes that will be necessary to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of my Black siblings without getting into the weeds of holding individuals accountable for their actions. I tried. I didn't get it exactly right. In response to that article, Clifford, a CLF member incarcerated in Illinois, asked me in a letter to look into the work of political philosopher Hannah Arendt, who wrote extensively about power and accountability from her vantage point as a survivor of the Holocaust in Germany. Specifically, Clifford challenged my assertion that, quote, I do not blame individual officers, unquote, for police violence against Black people. Drawing on Arendt's work, Clifford wrote to me, quote, by not placing blame for particular action or inaction on individual officers, we not only strip them of the personal responsibility necessary for holding them accountable, we undermine the importance and significance of the actions of those officers brave enough to stand up against the system. The words of Clifford. Hannah Arendt, in the essay that Clifford asked me to read, Personal Responsibility Under Dictatorship, writes, where all are guilty, none is. Making the case that it is better to suffer than to do wrong, Arendt says that individuals have a moral obligation
not to perpetuate systems of injustice, even when their own lives or livelihoods are at stake. Clifford and Hannah Arendt, of course, are correct. It is vital, even in an unjust system, that the individual perpetrators of acts of injustice be held accountable for their actions. Arendt also notes that politically, those who chose the lesser evil forget very quickly that they chose evil. Acceptance of lesser evils, she continues, is consciously used in conditioning the population at large to the acceptance of evil as such. This is precisely how systems as violent and unjust as modern policing in the United States have become institutions that most white Americans support and trust. Those of us acculturated to whiteness have been conditioned to accept the evil in our midst. Clifford is also right when he asserts that notions of responsibility and accountability are not limited to extreme cases. Each of us makes moral judgments every day. Each of us makes choices for good or bad every day. Each of us has the option again and again to choose to participate in perpetuating wrong or to oppose it. And each of us should be held accountable when our actions cause harm to others. It is here that we find tensions inherent in the principles of our Unitarian Universalist faith, the principles that Unitarian Universalist congregations covenant to affirm and promote. One such example is the tension between freedom and responsibility. Our fourth principle says, we affirm a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Freedom has limits. Elsewhere, the right of conscience, promoted in the fifth principle, is not always compatible with the justice for all we seek in our sixth. Conscience has limits too. It's a covenantal faith. We rely on how we agree to be together to help us decide what to do. And we rely on processes that help bring us back to covenant when we cause harm. Processes of accountability in which we are asked to stop the harm that we are doing, to understand the harm we have done, to make amends for that harm, and finally to agree not to do it again. Within our faith, just as in our society at large, these processes are imperfect, and yet they are how we move forward towards creating better systems. For as many times as we say that our faith is based in covenant, we miss that accountability way too often. Unitarian Universalists and our institutions too often miss the fact that we are called to make reparations when we harm someone, whether that harm is intentional or unintentional. Too often, when the free search for truth and meaning turns irresponsible, harm is done. We see this too often with cultural misappropriation, in which people colonize the faith traditions of others, steal their sacred texts and practices, and warp them beyond understanding. We read in our hymnals at the very beginning that our faith tradition draws upon wisdom from the world's religions. And those of us who are enculturated to whiteness too often take this as permission to just take things that do not belong to us. Too often, when the right of communities to vote is not weighed against our responsibility to the inherent too often, the right of communities to vote is not weighed against our responsibility to the interdependent web of all existence. And when that happens, harm is done. We see this in struggles for environmental justice around the world, from toxic waste dumped in Warren County, North Carolina, to mountains of US-generated garbage in China, to rising sea levels caused by increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, threatening the lives and livelihoods of island nations around the world. We see it, and we see that our right to vote for policies
within our borders causes ripples far beyond them. Too often, when the right of conscience is not tempered with our calls to compassion, justice, and equity, harm is done. We see this again and again in our faith. We see it in too many places to name, and yet there are some that are happening right now that I feel like I need to name. People who insist that their beliefs about vaccines based in disproven pseudoscience and fears are enough to put entire communities at risk because they are deeply held are causing harm. Never mind that we share our space with immune-compromised people who rely on herd immunity to protect them. Never mind that we share our space with children for whom there is not an approved vaccine yet. Those people are doing harm, and that harm needs to be addressed. People who believe outdated and misguided things about gender and sexuality, and who use those beliefs to dehumanize and marginalize LGBTQ people are doing harm. People whose notions about what constitutes a woman or a man excludes our transgender siblings, people who dismiss the existence of those of us whose gender exists outside of the binary, these people are doing harm, and that harm needs to be addressed. People who insist that race is not a valid social category and thus refuse to engage in developing an accountable analysis of how power is used and abused in our society and our congregations are doing harm. I don't see race, we are told by these people, who then follow that assertion by lifting up only the ideas of 18th century white Europeans and Americans. I note here that our society has evolved and developed since those ideas first came to be, and I invite those stuck in the white supremacy of previous centuries to grow as well, because those people are doing harm, and that harm needs to be addressed. People who repeat ad nauseum reactionary conservative talking points about critical race theory straight from Fox News without any understanding of what critical race theory actually is are doing harm. It is important to understand the deep cultural power of race in our society, and those people who are doing harm need to have their harm addressed. Just as in our wider society, the harm that is being done within our faith, within our congregations, and in our association at large, that harm is not equally shared by all people. People of color, including Black and Indigenous people, bear a disproportionate burden of the harm done by people acting out of covenant in our faith. And just as in our wider society, that harm needs to be addressed directly, not with platitudes and misdirection. Which brings us to the proposal to affirm and promote an 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism. In our larger institution, the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, this proposal is one of many currently being discussed by an Article 2 study commission. It will not be something we vote on for some time. We do not know the final form that it will take at our associational level. In fact, this week, the Canadian Unitarian Council adopted their version of this principle, worded slightly differently, but with the same general nugget inside of it. They adopted it just this week. In the meantime, however, while we're waiting for that commission to do its work, while we're waiting to see how we change things at our associational level, the emergency of spiritual harm still exists. And so we, as a congregation, are being asked to affirm and promote this principle in our work. The 8th principle reads, we covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppression in ourselves and our institutions. That is the proposed language that we are being asked to affirm and promote, even as the larger association discusses and wordsmiths and changes and incorporates in different ideas and feedback. We are asking the members of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship to recognize the emergency in our midst. The emergency of racism and oppression, the emergency of harm being done disproportionately to people whose identities are marginalized by systems of oppression in our society. We are asking all of us to engage in accountably dismantling racism and other oppressions, and to hold our congregations, especially this congregation, accountable for this work. Hannah Arendt would remind us that if this is simply an institutional responsibility, it is in fact no one's. So yes, this is all of our individual work too. We are asking each and every one of us to pay attention, to call people back into covenant when they do harm, to name that harm as harm, and to call people back into covenant, and to be open to repairing relationships when we are the ones who are doing the harm. We are asking each and every one of us to temper our freedom with responsibility, to temper our democratic process with a dedication to justice, equity, and compassion, to counter our individualism with interdependence. This is a call. A culture of accountability starts here. It is past time that our Unitarian Universalist movement embrace accountability as a vital part of our covenantal union this week, 60 years old. May it be so now. Amen.
So you may have noticed that Michael is from the UUA in the States. Their Church of the Larger Fellowship did choose as a congregation to pass the 8th Amendment as he stated it there, which is a little different than what the CUC has proposed. And one of the things they'd like us to do is if people have feedback for the CUC about, I'd like to see it worded differently, or concern about what kind of support we would get for looking at things. The CUC is working on a curriculum that sort of parallels the welcoming congregation curriculum and process, which was about sexual orientation and gender identity. And it will be available to us, as members of the CUC to do some work about racism and oppression, and have some discussions within our congregation about how it makes us feel, how difficult it is for us, and not to make us feel guilty, but to help us be more aware so that when we interact with other people, that we can say, oh, maybe I should say this a different way, or we should approach people more genuinely. Because our fellowships, like most of Canada, they reflect our population, but they in fact don't reflect the same percentage of people of color as are found in the general population here. So we have some work to do. If you would like to tune in on Wednesday night, we'll have a discussion about how people are feeling about the 8th and about racism in general. And we invite you to tuned in, if you've got the slip of paper, just give us some of your feedback, and so we can know which of the resources would be appropriate to bring here. Let's see, as you go out, we have our exits set up through the sanctuary because of COVID. And the collection basket is near the door. And just ask, yeah, right there. And you can donate by setting up a regular donation via our pad form. And there are forms on the other side, via PayPal at cvuf.ca, e-transfer to cvuf_treasurer@gmail.com, or a check, an old-fashioned check, made out to CVUF and mailed to us at this address, 250 Beach Drive in Comox.
Before I advance this, could I get a volunteer to come and get our kids from upstairs? Excellent, thank you.
I know it's very confusing.
It is.
We always have a Transforming Our World recipient, and for this time period, we are donating to the Comox Valley Caravan, which goes treats homeless and low-income people throughout the valley. If you have a special donation to that, we ask you to put it in the basket. And thank you for all your donations from the CVUF family and friends. And we are on YouTube. Is this still true?
It is.
Okay, just checking. So I'm going to ask you to give you the
All right.
check.
We had a couple of shifts in our tech from the very beginning, a couple of weeks ago. People on our Zoom calls, hi everybody, how you doing? Wanted to be seen, so they can see you and they can hear you when you unmute your mic. It's wonderful. So this is being recorded and will be edited. Joys and concerns aside, things like that, right? And the brunt of this meeting will be available on our YouTube channel after I do my magic with this recording at home. And all you have to do is open your browser, whether that's Chrome or Edge or whatever that is. Open it up, search for CVUF YouTube, Comox Valley Unitarian Fellowship YouTube. And you'll be able to click on some of the things that we've already done from the beginning of this year. And today should be up in, give me till Wednesday. Okay. Pretty happy about the grant we got from Pacific Northwest District, who helped with all of the cables, all of the connectors, all of the mic and the camera and the stand, and that we can do this and have you guys out there at home with us. Pretty excited. Yeah, so that's my spiel. We coming on back?
I don't know what to say. Does anyone?
Well, if they're coming.
Kids are coming.
So the kids are on their way back.
Yeah.
Is
it worth doing a scan with the camera for the Zoom people can see?
So yeah, can they? So
Do you want to
can
see
you?
who's here? Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I can do that.
Okay, we're gonna scan so you can all wave.
We're gonna
at the
go
people
around
on
every
Zoom
time.
land.
Here we go.
Say hello to the people from Zoom.
Say hello.
Zoom land. Hello, Zoom land people.
Hi, Zoomers.
Zoom lights,
Yeah.
Zoomy.
Zoomies, Zoomites.
How many are there? I can't see.
That's 7,
7.
including this camera. Yeah.
We have Steve
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
and Greg, Joy,
Greg.
Donna, Wanda, Christy.
Yeah, come on up. Come up and see what you want.
Hi, everyone.
We're
Hi, everyone.
reaching out and touching
Hi,
somebody.
Christine.
So we do have a larger monitor to do this on, but we did not get the right cables hooked up to manage it
Monitor
yet,
is not
so,
recognizing those cables,
yeah.
so I still have a little work to do.
So if anybody really has a desire to work on tech, and has, really seriously, if you have any expertise or want to work on tech, feel free to do that. And if you have a desire to work on any of the services this year, just you can talk to me, you can talk to Marvin, talk to Heather. So be great.
The ministerial search committee has got,
And there's a ministerial search committee going on. Yes.
got everybody you need on there.
No, I don't know. I haven't heard yet.
Have some royalty here.
We do have
My
royalty
goodness,
coming
everyone
in.
has crowns.
That's crowds.
You have to show the royalty that are here.
Okay, we gotta show this. You guys okay with the Zoom people looking at your crowns? Yes. Is that good? Here we go. Crowns on, everybody. Wow. Look at that.
You made these.
You made those?
What do you have on your crown?
Wow.
So we were looking at Sikhism as a source, and we were Nanak and talking about turbans and thinking about hats. And in the Sikh tradition, they give the girls the last name Princess and the boys the last name Lion.
Wow.
So we wanted to take it even further and let the girls choose to be both a lion and a princess, or one or the other if they like. And similarly, so most of them are both. But anyway, everybody chose what they wanted, and we talked about how whatever people choose, the only important thing is to accept each other and be kind to each other.
Oh, nice.
And these beautiful crowns or hats show them.
Yes. Wow.
Thank you.
There you go. It's got the-
Normally, we would, after service, mill around and share at least water or something. Because of COVID, we're not doing that. So if you want to stay for a little while, it's fine, but we are going to exit into the parking lot. And welcome to new people. Thank you, Tricia.
Tricia, hi.
I
Hey,
only have one question for you all. Only have one question for you all. When it comes to the 8th, what will the sound of our one voice be?
You're talking the principal,
Oh, yeah.
not the eighth of October.
Sound of
Navy video. Wow. So.
Just to go out on the same note we came in on. We, the member congregations, the Canadian Unitarian Council, covenant to affirm and promote individual and community action that accountably dismantles racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. Amen. Virtually impossible with the mask on. Thank you all.
Thank you, Heather. And thank you, for being our leader.
Yes.
Thank you.
That was wonderful.
If it doesn't move me, you won't see it. Does anybody want me to play that last one again, that last video? That song? You want to hear that song again? Yeah? I do. Oh, I know, you're quite right there.
So that's our. So there's a cabinet, stuff like there's a cabinet. So you're supposed to go off.
There we go. United, capital U.
Any spacing?
Nope.
Okay, Comox United join. Yep, no numbers. Oh. See if that makes a difference.
All right, I gotta say goodbye.
Yeah, anyway, it's a black
I
eyed.
will. Gets me every time. Thank you, YouTube viewers, for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed what was going on. Give us a little feedback, and we hope to see you next week. Thanks.